In a bustling city where skyscrapers pierced the clouds and cars honked endlessly, there lived a man named Marcus. He wasn't rich or famous. In fact, most people didn't even notice him as he went about his daily routine. Marcus was a sanitation worker, one of the many who kept the city clean but rarely received any recognition for their hard work. Every morning before the sun had fully risen, Marcus would don his bright orange uniform, grab his broom, and head out to sweep the streets. His job wasn't glamorous, but it was important, and Marcus took pride in what he did. Marcus's life wasn't easy. Years ago, tragedy had struck when his wife passed away in a car accident, leaving him to raise their 2 young children alone. Despite the pain, Marcus carried on. He worked long hours, often skipping meals just to make sure his kids had everything they needed. At night, after tucking them into bed, he'd sit by the window, staring at the stars, and thinking about his wife. She had always been his guiding light, and even though she was gone, her memory pushed him to keep going. One cold winter morning, as frost clung to the sidewalks and the air bit at his cheeks, Marcus arrived at his usual spot near an alleyway, downtown. It was quiet, save for the occasional rumble of a garbage truck in the distance. As he bent down to pick up a discarded soda can, he heard something strange, a faint whimpering sound. At first he thought it might be the wind, but the noise persisted. Curious, Marcus followed the sound, stepping carefully over piles of trash, until he reached a large dumpster. Peering behind it, Marcus froze. There, huddled against the cold, was a small dog. Its fur was matted, its body trembling, and one of its legs appeared to be trapped under a piece of broken wood. The poor creature looked up at Marcus with wide, frightened eyes, letting out another weak whimper. For a moment, Marcus hesitated. He had a full day of work ahead of him, and stopping to help this dog would mean falling behind schedule. But then he remembered his wife, how she used to say that kindness costs nothing but means everything. With a deep breath, Marcus knelt down and gently lifted the wood off the dog's leg. The animal flinched but didn't resist as Marcus scooped it into his arms. Wrapping it in his jacket to shield it from the cold, he carried it back to his cart. "Don't worry, little guy," he murmured softly. "I'll get you some help." During his lunch break, Marcus made a detour to a nearby veterinary clinic. The staff greeted him warmly, accustomed to seeing Marcus bring in stray animals he'd found during his rounds. After explaining what had happened, Marcus handed over the injured dog and waited anxiously while the vet examined it. The diagnosis wasn't good. The dog had a broken leg and signs of malnutrition, but the vet assured Marcus that with proper care, it would recover. Relieved, Marcus paid for the initial treatment using money he couldn't really afford to spare. Then, leaving the dog in the clinic's care, he returned to work. Back on the streets, Marcus tried to focus on his tasks, but his mind kept wandering back to the dog. He wondered if it had an owner somewhere, someone who missed it dearly. Or maybe it had been abandoned, left to fend for itself in the harsh city. Either way, Marcus felt a pang of sadness knowing that such a small, innocent creature could suffer so much. Later that evening, as Marcus walked home, he noticed flyers plastered on lampposts. They featured pictures of dogs and cats, all missing, with tearful pleas from owners desperate to find their pets. One flyer caught his eye, a photo of a scruffy terrier that looked eerily similar to the dog he'd rescued. Scanning the details, Marcus realized it matched perfectly. The owner lived only a few blocks away. Without wasting a moment, Marcus jotted down the address and decided to visit the next day. When Marcus arrived at the house, a woman answered the door. Her face was pale with worry, dark circles underlining her tired eyes. When Marcus explained why he was there, her expression shifted from confusion to disbelief, then overwhelming joy. She hugged him tightly, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she whispered repeatedly. "You saved my baby." That night, as Marcus lay in bed, he replayed the events of the day in his mind. Saving the dog hadn't been extraordinary. It was just something anyone else might have done. Yet seeing the gratitude in the woman's eyes reminded him of how powerful even the smallest acts of kindness could be. Little did Marcus know, This seemingly ordinary act would set off a chain reaction, transforming his life in ways he could never have imagined. Over the next few days, word of Marcus's rescue spread like wildfire. Someone at the vet clinic snapped a picture of him holding the injured dog and posted it online, along with a brief description of what had happened. Within hours, the post went viral. People were captivated by the story of the sanitation worker, who risked his time and resources to save a helpless animal. Comments poured in, praising Marcus's selflessness and urging others to follow his example. Local news outlets picked up the story, dubbing Marcus the guardian of the alley. Reporters camped outside his modest apartment building, eager to interview the man behind the heroic deed. At first, Marcus avoided them, uncomfortable with the sudden attention. But when his coworkers showed him videos of strangers talking about how inspired they were by his actions, he began to understand the impact he'd made. Finally, Marcus agreed to speak publicly. During the interview, he spoke humbly, deflecting praise and emphasizing that he had merely done what anyone else would have done. He shared stories about his late wife, describing how her love for helping others had shaped his own values. Viewers were moved by his sincerity, and overnight, Marcus became a symbol of hope, a reminder that heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear bright orange uniforms and wield brooms. As the weeks passed, Marcus's life changed dramatically. Strangers approached him on the street to thank him, while others sent letters expressing how his story had motivated them to perform their own acts of kindness. What started as a simple decision to help a suffering dog had ignited a movement, proving that even the smallest gestures can create waves of change. And for Marcus, it was just the beginning. The story of Marcus and the injured dog spread faster than anyone could have anticipated. Social media platforms buzzed with posts, shares, and comments about the sanitation worker who had gone out of his way to save a helpless animal. Pictures of Marcus holding the dog, wrapped snugly in his jacket, were shared millions of times. People couldn't get enough of the heartwarming tale. For many, it was a reminder of the goodness that still existed in the world, a beacon of hope amid the chaos of everyday life. Local news stations weren't far behind. Reporters scrambled to uncover more details about Marcus's life, eager to paint a full picture of the man behind the viral moment. They interviewed his coworkers, neighbors, and even the vet who had treated the dog. Each person echoed the same sentiment. Marcus was a kind, hard-working individual who always put others before himself. One coworker recalled how Marcus often stayed late to help clean up areas that weren't even part of his assigned route. Another neighbor mentioned how he regularly checked on elderly residents in the building, making sure they had groceries or someone to talk to. As the story gained momentum, Marcus found himself thrust into the spotlight. At first, he tried to ignore it. He continued waking up early, sweeping the streets, and doing his job like any other day. But it became impossible to avoid the attention. Strangers stopped him on the street, thanking him for inspiring them. Some offered hugs, others simply shook his hand, their eyes filled with admiration. Marcus didn't know how to respond. He wasn't used to being recognized, let alone celebrated. One evening, after finishing his shift, Marcus returned home to find a group of reporters waiting outside his apartment. Cameras flashed as microphones were shoved toward his face. "Marcus, how does it feel to be a hero?" one reporter asked. Another chimed in. "Do you think your actions will inspire others to do the same?" Marcus stood there, overwhelmed, and unsure of what to say. He hadn't done anything extraordinary, just what he believed was right. Yet here he was, being called a hero by complete strangers. Eventually, Marcus agreed to sit down for an interview. Sitting in front of bright, studio lights, he felt out of place but determined to stay true to himself. When the host asked why he had saved the dog, Marcus replied simply, "Because it needed help." His answer was met with applause from the audience. He went on to share stories about his late wife, describing how she had instilled in him the importance of kindness and compassion. "She always said that no act of kindness is too small," Marcus explained. "Even if it seems insignificant to you, it might mean everything to someone else." The interview resonated deeply with viewers. Tears streamed down faces as Marcus spoke about raising his children alone and keeping his wife's memory alive through his actions. By the time the segment ended, Marcus had become more than just a sanitation worker. He was a symbol of resilience, humility, and selflessness. The hashtag, "You Be Like Marcus," began trending online, encouraging people to perform random acts of kindness in their own communities. But fame came with its challenges. Not everyone was supportive. Some critics dismissed Marcus's actions as a publicity stunt, claiming he had only helped the dog to gain attention. Others argued that a sanitation worker shouldn't receive so much praise when doctors, teachers, and other professionals worked equally hard without recognition. These negative comments stung, especially because Marcus had never sought the limelight. He struggled to understand why some people felt the need to tear him down instead of celebrating the good deed itself. Despite the backlash, Marcus refused to let negativity consume him. Instead, he focused on using his newfound platform for good. Inspired by the overwhelming response to his story, he decided to start a community initiative called Acts of Kindness. The idea was simple: encourage people to perform small, meaningful deeds for others, whether it was helping a neighbor carry groceries, donating clothes to a shelter, or volunteering at a local food bank. Marcus believed that if everyone committed to doing just one kind thing each day, the world would slowly become a better place. To kickstart the initiative, Marcus organized a cleanup drive in his neighborhood. Dozens of volunteers showed up, armed with trash bags and gloves. Together, they transformed litter-filled parks and alleyways into clean, welcoming spaces. Local businesses donated refreshments, while schools sent students to participate. The event was a massive success, drawing media coverage and inspiring similar drives in neighboring cities. Word of Marcus's efforts reached influential figures, including politicians and celebrities. A famous actress invited him to speak at a charity gala, where he shared his vision of a kinder, more compassionate society. His speech moved the audience to tears, prompting several attendees to pledge financial support for his initiatives. Companies approached him with sponsorship offers, but Marcus politely declined, insisting that acts of kindness remain grassroots and community-driven. Meanwhile, Marcus's family adjusted to their new reality. His children, Emily and Jake, were initially embarrassed by the sudden attention. They weren't used to having cameras follow them around or hearing classmates talk about their dad on TV. However, as they watched Marcus handle the pressure with grace and humility, they began to see him in a different light. To them, he had always been a loving father who worked tirelessly to provide for them. Now they realized he was also a role model, a man whose actions inspired thousands to believe in the power of kindness. At school, Emily and Jake noticed subtle changes in how their classmates treated them. Kids who had once teased them for having a garbage man dad now looked up to them with respect. Teachers praised Marcus during assemblies, urging students to emulate his example. For the first time, Emily and Jake felt proud, not just of their father but also of themselves for being part of such a remarkable journey. Back at work, Marcus's co-workers rallied around him, proud to see one of their own receive recognition. They joked that Marcus had finally given sanitation workers the respect they deserved. In truth, his story had shed light on the vital yet often overlooked role they played in society. Cities across the country began implementing programs to improve working conditions for sanitation workers, citing Marcus's contributions as inspiration. Weeks turned into months. Marcus's influence continued to grow. Schools incorporated his story into lesson plans, teaching children about empathy and the importance of helping others. Statues were erected in his honor, and murals depicting him rescuing the dog appeared on walls throughout the city. Artists painted portraits of him, capturing the quiet dignity in his eyes. Even late-night talk show hosts joked about wanting to be like Marcus, further cementing his status as a cultural icon. Yet, despite all the accolades, Marcus remained grounded. He knew that true change didn't come from statues or hashtags. It came from action. Every morning he woke up at dawn, put on his uniform, and headed out to sweep the streets. To him, nothing had changed. He was still the same man who had rescued a dog from behind a dumpster. And perhaps that was the most extraordinary thing about Marcus. No matter how much the world celebrated him, he never lost sight of who he was. A humble, hard-working individual committed to making the world a little brighter, one small act of kindness at a time. Little did Marcus know, this was only the beginning. As his story continued to ripple outward, touching lives far beyond his city, greater challenges and opportunities awaited him. But for now, he focused on what mattered most, staying true to himself and spreading kindness wherever he went. As Marcus's fame grew, so did the expectations placed upon him. People began to see him not just as a sanitation worker or even a kind-hearted individual, but as a symbol of hope and change. While this newfound admiration brought opportunities, it also came with challenges that tested Marcus in ways he had never imagined. The weight of being a public figure was heavier than he had anticipated, and soon, Marcus realized that kindness wasn't always met with gratitude. It could also invite criticism, envy, and doubt. One of the first hurdles Marcus faced was skepticism from certain groups. Some critics dismissed his actions as insincere, claiming he had only helped the dog to gain attention. Others accused him of using his story to climb the social ladder, suggesting that a sanitation worker shouldn't receive such widespread acclaim when other professions worked equally hard without recognition. These comments hurt Marcus deeply. He had never sought fame or fortune. All he had done was follow his conscience. Yet here he was, being attacked for something that had come naturally to him. At first, Marcus tried to ignore the negativity. He reminded himself of why he had started acts of kindness in the first place, to inspire others to make the world a better place. But the constant barrage of criticism began to wear on him. There were nights when he lay awake, questioning whether he deserved the praise people showered on him. Was he really making a difference, or was it all just empty words? For someone who had spent most of his life avoiding the spotlight, the pressure felt suffocating. It wasn't until one particularly difficult day that Marcus decided to confront these feelings head-on. After finishing a community cleanup event, where volunteers had transformed a neglected park into a vibrant green space, Marcus found himself surrounded by reporters asking about his future plans. One journalist posed a question that struck a nerve. "Do you think you're doing enough, Marcus? Some people say your efforts are too small to create real change." The question lingered in Marcus's mind long after the interview ended. That evening, sitting alone in his apartment, he allowed himself to reflect on everything that had happened since rescuing the dog. He thought about the countless lives he had touched, the children who now dreamed of helping others, the families whose neighborhoods had been revitalized, the strangers who had reached out to thank him for inspiring them. And yet, despite all the good he had done, he couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't enough. Determined to find clarity, Marcus made an appointment with a therapist. It was a decision that surprised even himself. Growing up, mental health had been a taboo topic in his community, and Marcus had always prided himself on handling problems independently. But now, faced with emotions he didn't fully understand, he knew he needed help. During their sessions, Marcus opened up about his fears, insecurities, and the overwhelming sense of responsibility he felt to live up to everyone's expectations. Through therapy, Marcus learned valuable lessons about self-compassion and resilience. His therapist reminded him that no one is perfect and that it's okay to feel overwhelmed. She encouraged him to focus on what truly mattered, his intentions, and to let go of the need for external validation. Slowly but surely, Marcus began to heal. He realized that while he couldn't control how others perceived him, he could control how he responded to their opinions. This newfound perspective gave him strength during moments when doubt crept in. Around the same time, Marcus encountered another challenge, one that would test his courage and reinforce his commitment to helping others. One chilly evening, as he was returning home from a charity event, Marcus witnessed a horrifying scene. A cyclist had been hit by a speeding car, which fled the scene without stopping. Without hesitation, Marcus rushed to the injured person's side. Using basic first aid skills he had learned years ago, he stabilized the victim until paramedics arrived. Though his quick thinking likely saved the cyclist's life, the incident left Marcus shaken. For days afterward, he replayed the accident in his mind, haunted by images of the crumpled bike and bloodied pavement. He couldn't stop wondering if he could have done more. The experience triggered anxiety attacks, making it difficult for him to focus on his work or sleep at night. Once again, Marcus turned to therapy, where he processed his trauma and developed coping strategies. The cyclist, whose name was Sarah, recovered after weeks in the hospital. When she finally regained consciousness, she learned about Marcus's role in saving her life. Grateful beyond words, Sarah reached out to thank him personally. Their meeting was emotional. Sarah hugged Marcus tightly, tears streaming down her face as she expressed her gratitude. Inspired by his selflessness, Sarah joined Marcus's Acts of Kindness initiative, becoming one of its most passionate advocates. Together, Marcus and Sarah emphasized the importance of mental health awareness, encouraging others to prioritize their well-being alongside helping others. They organized workshops where participants shared their struggles and learned techniques to manage stress and anxiety. These sessions resonated deeply with attendees, many of whom admitted they had never considered seeking help before. Through these efforts, Marcus proved that vulnerability wasn't a weakness. It was a strength that fostered connection and understanding. As Marcus continued to grow both personally and professionally, his family noticed a positive shift. Emily and Jake, once embarrassed by their father's sudden fame, now saw him as a source of inspiration. They watched as he navigated adversity with grace and determination, teaching them invaluable lessons about perseverance and empathy. School. They became ambassadors for kindness, organizing fundraisers and volunteering at shelters. Their classmates admired their dedication, and teachers praised them for embodying the values Marcus had instilled in them. Marcus's co-workers also rallied around him, proud to see one of their own rise above challenges. They formed a support network, checking in on him regularly and offering encouragement whenever he doubted himself. Together, they brainstormed ideas to expand Acts of Kindness, transforming it into a nationwide movement. Cities across the country adopted similar initiatives, sparking a wave of positivity that transcended borders and cultures. Despite the obstacles he faced, Marcus refused to give up. He understood that every journey has its ups and downs, and the true growth comes from overcoming adversity. By staying true to his values and leaning on those who cared about him, Marcus emerged stronger than ever. His story served as a reminder that kindness isn't always easy, but it's always worth it. Little did Marcus know, his journey was far from over. As his influence continued to spread, new opportunities and challenges awaited him. But now he focused on what mattered most: spreading kindness, supporting others, and proving that even in the face of adversity, compassion could shine through. As Marcus's influence continued to grow, so did the complexity of the challenges he faced. The world had embraced him as a symbol of kindness and selflessness, but with that admiration came expectations, and not all of them were easy to meet. For someone who had spent most of his life living quietly and humbly, navigating this new reality was like walking on shifting sands. Every step forward seemed to bring fresh obstacles, forcing Marcus to dig deeper into his resilience and character. One of the biggest hurdles Marcus encountered was burnout. Between managing acts of kindness, attending events, giving speeches, and mentoring volunteers, his schedule became overwhelming. What started as a passion project had turned into a full-time responsibility, leaving little room for rest or personal time. At first, Marcus tried to push through, telling himself that he couldn't afford to slow down, not when so many people were counting on him. But the toll it took on his health soon became impossible to ignore. He began experiencing frequent headaches, fatigue, and moments of irritability, things he had never dealt with before. His co-workers noticed the change too. Where once Marcus greeted everyone with a warm smile and cheerful demeanor, he now seemed distracted and distant. Even his children, Emily and Jake, picked up on the shift. They would often find their father staring blankly at the wall after dinner, his mind clearly elsewhere. Concerned, they urged him to take a break, but Marcus brushed off their concerns, insisting that he was fine. It wasn't until one fateful evening that Marcus finally hit a breaking point. After spending hours organizing a community cleanup event, he returned home exhausted. As he sat on the couch trying to muster the energy to make dinner, he felt a sharp pain in his chest. Panicked, he called an ambulance and was rushed to the hospital. Doctors diagnosed him with extreme stress and exhaustion, warning him that if he didn't slow down, his condition could worsen. The diagnosis forced Marcus to confront a harsh truth. He couldn't keep going at this pace without risking his well-being. For the first time since his wife's passing, Marcus allowed himself to admit that he needed help, not just physically but emotionally as well. He reached out to his therapist again, resuming sessions to address the mounting pressure he felt. Through therapy, he learned the importance of setting boundaries and prioritizing self-care. It was a difficult lesson for someone who had always put others' needs above his own. But Marcus realized that taking care of himself wasn't selfish, it was necessary. With renewed determination, Marcus began restructuring his life. He delegated tasks within acts of kindness, empowering trusted volunteers to take on leadership roles. This decision wasn't easy. Marcus had always been hands-on, reluctant to let go of control. But as he watched others step up and excel, he felt a sense of pride and relief. By sharing the workload, he not only lightened his own burden but also strengthened the movement, ensuring its sustainability long after he stepped back. Another unexpected challenge arose when Marcus received an invitation to speak at an international conference on humanitarian efforts. The opportunity was thrilling, a chance to share his story with a global audience, but it also brought anxiety. Public speaking had never been Marcus's strong suit, and the thought of addressing thousands of people in a foreign country terrified him. Memories of past interviews flooded his mind, reminding him of how vulnerable he had felt under the spotlight. To prepare, Marcus sought guidance from a public speaking coach. Over several weeks, he practiced tirelessly, rehearsing his speech, until he knew every word by heart. He focused on delivering his message authentically, channeling the same humility and sincerity that had resonated with audiences before. On the day of the conference, nerves still gripped him as he walked onto the stage. But as he looked out at the sea of faces, he remembered why he was there: to inspire others to believe in the power of kindness. With that thought, his fear melted away, replaced by a quiet confidence. Marcus's speech was met with thunderous applause. Audience members lined up afterward to thank him, sharing stories of how his work had impacted their lives. One woman tearfully recounted how acts of kindness had inspired her to start a similar initiative in her hometown, while another man credited Marcus with helping him overcome depression by encouraging acts of service. These interactions reinforced Marcus's belief that even small gestures could create ripples of change, touching lives in ways he might never fully understand. Despite these triumphs, Marcus continued to face criticism. Some skeptics accused him of profiting from his fame, pointing to the sponsorships and partnerships acts of kindness had attracted. Others dismissed his efforts as superficial, arguing that true change required systemic reforms rather than individual actions. While Marcus understood the importance of addressing larger issues, he believed that grassroots movements played a crucial role in creating momentum for broader change. He responded to these criticisms calmly, focusing on the tangible impact his initiatives had made rather than engaging in arguments. Amidst the chaos, Marcus found solace in the simple joys of life. He spent more time with his children, rediscovering the laughter and connection they shared. Emily and Jake, now teenagers, amazed him with their maturity and compassion. They often accompanied him to events, proudly standing by his side as they helped organize activities and interacted with participants. Their presence reminded Marcus of what truly mattered: family, love, and the legacy he hoped to leave behind. Marcus also reconnected with old friends and neighbors, many of whom had supported him during his darkest days. They gathered for barbecues and game nights, filling his home with warmth and laughter. These moments grounded him, reminding him that no matter how much the world changed, some things remained constant. His late wife's memory lingered in these gatherings, her spirit alive in the bonds he cherished. As months passed, Marcus's perspective shifted. He no longer viewed challenges as roadblocks, but as opportunities for growth. Each obstacle taught him something valuable about himself, about others, and about the world around him. He came to see that adversity wasn't something to fear. It was a teacher, shaping him into a stronger, wiser version of himself. By embracing this mindset, Marcus inspired those around him to do the same. Volunteers within Acts of Kindness adopted his approach, viewing setbacks as stepping stones rather than failures. Together, they tackled projects with renewed enthusiasm, knowing that every effort, no matter how small, contributed to a greater purpose. Looking back, Marcus marveled at how far he had come. From rescuing a single dog behind a dumpster to spearheading a nationwide movement, his journey had been anything but predictable. Yet through it all, he remained steadfast in his belief that kindness was a force capable of transforming lives, including his own. Little did Marcus know, his story was about to enter a new chapter, one that would test his resolve in ways he couldn't yet imagine. But for now he stood tall, ready to face whatever lay ahead with the same courage and compassion that had carried him this far. Years passed, and Marcus's influence continued to grow in ways that even he couldn't have predicted. What had started as a single act of kindness, saving an injured dog, had blossomed into a global movement that inspired millions. From Isand, bustling cities to quiet villages, people embraced the philosophy of acts of kindness, transforming their communities one small gesture at a time. For Marcus, this was more than just success. It was proof that compassion could ripple outward, creating waves of change that transcended borders and cultures. As Marcus entered his later years, he reflected on his journey with a sense of fulfillment. The man who had once been content sweeping streets now stood as a symbol of hope and humanity. Schools across the country included his story in their curriculums, teaching children about empathy, resilience, and the power of small actions. Statues were erected in his honor, murals adorned city walls, and documentaries chronicled his life from humble beginnings to global recognition. Yet despite all the accolades, Marcus remained grounded. To him, none of it mattered if it didn't inspire others to do good. One of the most profound changes Marcus witnessed was how his work impacted future generations. His children, Emily and Jake, grew up to become leaders in their respective fields, carrying forward the values their father had instilled in them. Emily became a social worker, dedicating her career to helping underprivileged families rebuild their lives. Jake pursued environmental activism, organizing campaigns to combat climate change and promote sustainable living. Both credited their father for showing them the importance of service and compassion. "I don't think we'd be where we are today without Dad," Emily once said during an interview. "He taught us that no matter how big or small your contribution is, it matters, and that belief has guided everything we've done." Jake echoed her sentiment, adding, "Dad showed us that kindness isn't just something you do, it's who you are. That lesson stays with you forever." Marcus's legacy extended beyond his immediate family. Thousands of volunteers who had joined Acts of Kindness went on to start their own initiatives, addressing issues ranging from homelessness to education inequality. In every corner of the world, people found creative ways to spread positivity, often citing Marcus as their inspiration. A young woman in India launched a free tutoring program for children in rural areas after hearing Marcus's story. A man in Brazil organized beach cleanups, motivating entire neighborhoods to take responsibility for their environment. Even celebrities joined the movement, using their platforms to amplify Marcus's message. Despite the widespread admiration, Marcus never lost sight of his roots. He continued working as a sanitation worker until retirement, believing that no job was too small to make a difference. When asked why he hadn't pursued a more glamorous career given his fame, Marcus simply replied, "This is my purpose. Keeping the streets clean is my way of serving the community, just like everyone else does in their own way." Retirement didn't slow Marcus down. If anything, it gave him more time to focus on mentoring young people and advocating for causes close to his heart. He traveled extensively, speaking at conferences, schools, and community events. Everywhere he went, he emphasized the importance of humility and perseverance. You don't need money or power to make a difference, he would say. All you need is a willing heart and a desire to help others. As Marcus aged, he began thinking about the kind of legacy he wanted to leave behind. He knew that statues and awards wouldn't endure forever, but ideas, and the actions they inspired, could. With this in mind, he established the Marcus Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting grassroots movements focused on kindness and community development. Funded by donations from supporters worldwide, the foundation provided grants to individuals and groups working to create positive change. The launch of the foundation coincided with another milestone, Marcus's 80th birthday. Friends, family, and admirers gathered to celebrate the man who had touched so many lives. It was a joyous occasion, filled with laughter, music, and heartfelt speeches. One speaker, a former volunteer named Lisa, shared how Marcus had helped her overcome addiction by encouraging her to channel her energy into helping others. "He didn't just save me," she said through tears. "He gave me a reason to live." The celebration also marked the unveiling of a documentary titled Kindness Knows No Bounds, which chronicled Marcus's journey from anonymity to global acclaim. The film captured not only his triumphs, but also his struggles, the burnout, the criticism, the moments of doubt, and highlighted how he overcame them with grace and determination. Viewers left theaters inspired, vowing to carry forward the torch of kindness in their own lives. In his final years, Marcus spent much of his time reflecting on the lessons he had learned throughout his life. He wrote a memoir, sharing stories of his childhood, his marriage, the loss of his wife, and the unexpected twists and turns that had shaped him. The book became a bestseller, resonating with readers of all ages. Many described it as a guide to living a meaningful life, filled with wisdom and warmth. Marcus passed away peacefully at the age of 82, surrounded by loved ones. News of his death sent shockwaves around the world, with tributes pouring in from every corner. Social media platforms lit up with memories of how he had inspired people to perform acts of kindness. Memorials were held in cities across the globe, each one celebrating the extraordinary life of an ordinary man. Though Marcus was gone, his spirit lived on. People continued performing acts of kindness in his name, ensuring that his legacy endured. Schools named scholarships after him, parks bore plaques commemorating his contributions, and countless individuals carried his philosophy in their hearts. His story served as a reminder that heroes aren't defined by grand gestures or superhuman abilities. They're ordinary people who choose to do extraordinary things. Looking back on Marcus's life, it was clear that his impact stemmed not from what he achieved, but from how he achieved it. He approached every challenge with humility, every victory with gratitude, and every person with kindness. He proved that even the smallest acts, a smile, a helping hand, a moment of understanding, could create ripples of change that transformed Selfless. Marcus's journey wasn't without its struggles, but perhaps that was the point. Life rarely follows a straight path, and true greatness lies not in avoiding obstacles but in overcoming them with courage and compassion. Through his example, Marcus showed the world that anyone, regardless of their background or circumstances, has the power to make a difference, and sometimes those differences can turn into tidal waves, reshaping the world in ways we never imagined. As Marcus often said, kindness costs nothing but means everything. Those words echoed long after his passing, inspiring generations to come. For Marcus, leaving a lasting legacy wasn't about being remembered. It was about ensuring that the spirit of kindness lived on, touching hearts and changing lives for years to come.